Thanks for joining me, everyone. You're listening to The Tim Laskus Show. And yes, I'm Tim Laskus, and this is episode 57. If you are looking for an optimized hosting site for WordPress, look no further. Bluehost is the way to go. They have plans starting out at $3.95 a month. How cool is that? They offer free domains, free site builders, one-click WordPress install. Love that. I can do one click. Man, that's easy enough. 24/7 support and 30-day money-back guarantee. Head on over to timlaskus.com/resources. Click on the Bluehost link to get your discount rate. Bluehost. Head over to timlaskus.com/resources and get your rate reduced. Get that. Go right now. Don't waste any time. Now on to today's featured guest, who is Jesse Inman. Jesse, I think everybody's just going to rave about this episode because he shares his awesome story of how him and his brother just went into the wine business. They didn't really know much. They didn't know anything at all. Threw in the only money they had, what they had left, bought up all this wine, and they were like, oh crap, now what do we do? This is a lot harder than we thought. And they're out in California. He continues to grow, and they're just doing fantastic. He's even making wine for Jeff Gordon. If you're a NASCAR fan, you know who Jeff Gordon is. But they do a lot of great wines, and he just shares some awesome content. You'll even hear a train in the background because where his office is, there's a train that goes back and forth. But it just kind of adds to the whole show. So I know you're going to enjoy it. So get your bottle of wine out and get ready for a great guest. Enjoy.
The Tim Laskus Show, in search of entrepreneurial gold. Tim digs deep into the minds of his guests, entertaining, down to earth, and informative. Now, here's your host, Tim Laskus.
Welcome, everyone. I'm very happy to announce my featured guest, Jesse Inman. Jesse, thanks for being on the show.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hey, you were just telling me you went to one of those Wim Hof ice bath events, and you jumped in, you stripped down naked and jumped into an ice bath. Tell the listeners about that.
Just shy of naked. Yeah, it was San Francisco, so that probably would have been perfectly fine too. But it was, so me and the cold don't get along very well. So it was, to say the least, very traumatic. I kept looking at the girl I went with, and I was like, I think I'm going to hate this. This is the worst thing I could possibly be doing. And so I had a whole new respect for Wim Hof after I learned that he spent 2 hours in ice. Well, I think that was the world record. I spent 2 minutes, and I was like, I almost punched the guy next to me in the face just so I could get out of there.
Now, you went with your girlfriend, right? You were saying?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a place you want to go with your girlfriend, because cold water, shrinkage.
Yeah, it was
I don't know.
A topic of discussion for sure.
There's a lot of covering up going on there.
Yeah, all the men getting in their bathing suits in the bathroom were happily facing each other, and then when they were getting out of their cold wetsuits, everybody was facing the corner.
That's great stuff, and I love the Wim Hof stories. I mean, he's swimming under ice. He climb Mount Everest in his underwear. I mean,
he's got so much charisma, it's ridiculous.
The guy is incredible. I hope to go to one of his events, so that's cool that you were able to share that with us. But tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, Jesse, and what are you doing professionally, and what are you currently working on?
Well, for the last, people keep telling me, like, well, what would you do if you're not in the wine business? I say, not a whole lot, because I've been doing it since I was a pup, you know? I got into the wine business really outside of school. My uncle invited me into the wine business, and I've been helping him make wine until, I guess, 2006 I started there, and then 2010 I took over his brand and started making wine for Augusta Briggs Winery. Around 2006, my brother and I started our own brand called Roma Lily. We released our first vintage in 2008, I think. So it's just been, I guess, making booze ever since 2006.
Wow.
I'm 33 now, and so I started when I was, 24, something like that.
So you've been doing this for quite a while. So you started out working with your uncle in the wine business, and then at some point you decided to kind of make that leap into, I guess, on your own with your brother. What was going on? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, time period wise, I think so. I have an 8 year old now. So right around that time, um, my brother and I've always I grew up really poor. And so I always wanted to, I never knew what the hell I wanted to do with my life. It was kind of that rich dad, poor dad. My brother and I talk about this all the time. We didn't really know what we wanted to do. And I was so horrible at spending money that I just didn't do it. And so I saved up $10,000 or so by the time I was a sophomore in college. And wound up taking that and asking my uncle. I said, "Well, you've been in the wine business for a long time. What do I do with this money?" And he said, "Well, we have some options." And so I wound up making a grape connection through a friend and saying, "Well, can we take this grapes and make it into wine?" And he had a connection. We could make it into wine, sell some bulk wine, bought some wine from somebody or some juice from somebody else, fermented it together, sold it, made enough money to start our own brand. I had a couple, 10 barrels of wine I kept out of that project and started our first vintage of Roma Lily, just kind of without even really knowing what the hell we were doing. One benefit of being young and dumb is the dumb part, and you'd make decisions you normally wouldn't otherwise.
Now, looking back, would you have jumped into the wine business on your own if now that you know all the kind of ins and outs and difficulties?
I say all the time, if I knew then what I knew now, I would not have made the same decisions. That's why that dumb part really paid off, I guess, because it I was smart enough to know that I was dumb. And so I definitely wouldn't have made the same decisions, at least in the same ways that I made them. So youth had its benefits in that regard. But at the same time, my brother and I have had to kind of crawl backwards through some of the sludge that we've created through having an unknown business background, you know?
Right. Sure. So you were kind of blind to all the pitfalls, and you just sounds like you were figuring it out along the way, and kind of cleaning up your mess from some mistakes, which we all make mistakes. And so how long did it take you before you actually saw a profit?
Well, the wine business is a tough business too. I don't think most it takes a lot of money to make it in the wine business, and I think a lot of people don't realize that. The model has changed within the wine business now that there's you don't have to have a big fancy winery on the hill to get into the wine business like you used to. Now you have custom crush options where someone else could rent out a piece of their winery to you. So the cost to entry has come down dramatically. That said, competition has gone way up. So the market is saturated, is all get out. And so now for some, there's the ultra premium, ultra luxury of brands, and those guys have the winery on the hill. For the guys in the middle, where Aaron and I are, my brother, it's more of a dogfight. And for some people, if you don't have any clout, it's kind of a race to the bottom because everybody's discounting, discounting, discounting. You go to a sommelier at a restaurant, and he's got 16 people with great Pinot, and this guy's offering this price, this guy's offering that price. It can be very interesting. So when it comes to turning a profit, my brother and I have done better making wine for other people than making wine for ourselves.
Mm,
The overhead is much smaller. The time and energy is much smaller, so it allows you to focus a lot more. And so we started turning a profit really when we started making wine for other people versus ourselves. We have three brands ourselves, and they've all made money, but I wouldn't say they justify their own companies as they did for years, if that makes
so
sense.
basically, you're supplying the product, and then they take all the risk with the marketing and their brand and all of that stuff. And so
Yeah, making
it,
it's
it
the easy part, selling it's the hard part is kind of the old adage in the wine business.
Uh-huh. And so it sounded like you figured out the real, I guess, the nice niche is okay. Yeah, it's become so popular, and now you can go in any 7-Eleven and pick up a bottle of wine, and there's a lot of people selling wine. So it's like, hey, come on into the market, and we'll supply you and let you figure it out how difficult it is. And so
Yeah,
that's an
or
excellent
or
tactic.
somebody who's been doing it for, I've had people that have just come into the wine business and made wine for them, and they say, "Oh shit, this is tough." I'm like, "Yep, told you." And then I've had people that have come into the wine business like 20, 30 years before us, and then they already have distribution networks or contacts or whatever, or enough money to get them where they want to go, and so it's a little bit easier for them.
So to have deep pockets sometimes really helps to be
Deep
able to.
pockets and not what you know, it's who you know, and all that.
Uh-huh. for sure. Now, since you've learned a ton of information, not only about wine and all of that goes in the industry, so to speak, but I'm sure you've learned some entrepreneurial type tips. What would you kind of share with entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs who are listening today, as far as who are getting ready to take that leap, or maybe they're just kind of starting out, and regardless of what business they're in? Do you have any tips for them?
Well, first off, I'm a realist, so I say don't bullshit yourself. If you don't think that there's a market for something that you're creating, then I would not do it, because making a market's a lot easier, a lot harder rather, than fulfilling a market that you already know exists. It's kind of the old, what is it, the business model generation. I don't know if you know that philosophy of business, but it's if you're going to create a widget and try and sell it to people, it's a lot harder than if you know that someone needs a widget and then try and sell it to them. So that said, don't bullshit yourself and say, hell, I love artisanal couches and I'm going to go out there and make artisanal couches. Well, that's really tough unless you know a lot of people that want artisanal couches. I'm maybe going off on a tangent here, but
No.
when it comes down to it, I think knowing who your client is, who your customers are, and being really, really pointed and really organized and getting them what they want, not what necessarily what you want. That's the same thing with the wine business. There's a lot of people that are come out here in the wine business and they say, I want to make this kind of wine. Well, that's terrific. But if you want to make that kind of wine and nobody wants to buy it, good luck.
Okay.
So you have to meet people in the middle. You might be able to steer people gently in one direction, but you're not going to say, I want to make this wine and you're going to drink it, because that's just not how the world works.
And that takes time. And so you're saying, be real on what is the demand. If there's no demand, you may have the best idea in the world to you, and it's like, oh, nobody's doing this or nobody's selling that, so I'm going to offer it. And you think you're the smartest person in the world. There's 9 times out of 10, there's a reason why other people aren't doing it or other people are not offering it. And so you're saying, just really get clear on what is the market demand, what are their wants, and then give it to them.
And we can't be all that innovative within wine, but just from my observations is be innovative within something that you know is already a success. Be a trendsetter within the bounds of an already successful potential business.
Right. And just kind of put your little twist on it and make it just a little bit more unique, a little bit different. All it takes is something small to make it different and unique. And
Yeah.
so those are great tips. And is there anything that you've used either online or something that's really helped you as an entrepreneur, either it's just to help in your business or to help as far as motivation or any of that?
Well, I've used Trello before with a couple different projects, and I think it's great because it's a great organizational tool. It's actually very powerful. It takes a little while to get to know it really in depth, but it's a great tool. That, and basically for someone who's as bohemian and fly by the seat as my pants as I am, Google Calendars is a crazy asset for me. I mean, just having somebody, having something rather, someday maybe a somebody, um, tell you what to do and when to do it. I mean, I've made notes for myself and looked back like, who made that note? And it was me. But it was so long ago, and I was so busy that it helped keep me organized. And actually, I made a little note here too. When it goes back to tips and tools, I've just recently sent my brother Mark Manson's new book. Have you read that or heard of it? It's
I haven't read it. No.
The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. um,
No, I haven't heard of it either.
yeah, it's an interesting. It's more of a life tools. It's somewhat cliche and simply written, but he's got a lot of great things to say. It's don't take life too serious. Find the things you want to take serious and go that route. And I'd apply that to business as well. You don't want to get into something just for the money, because after a while it becomes a drag. If you're talking to somebody who likes to, I don't live to work. I work to live. I have things I live for. But when it ultimately comes down to it, it's find something you enjoy. Don't make your hobbies your business, because then you lose your passion. But there's a happy medium there, I think, and remembering things like that. So don't be afraid to pick up a book and learn from it.
Well, those are great. And who was the author of the book again?
Mark Manson.
Mark Manson. I'll have that in the show notes for everyone. That's great. Well, thank you for sharing, Jesse. Now,
Yeah.
when did you first realize that you wanted to be an entrepreneur? I mean, it sounds like you're working with your uncle and you had some money, but you know, did you always have that entrepreneurial kind of gene and it just kind of came out at that point? Like, walk us through that.
Sometimes I say yes and sometimes I say no. So I grew up a little different maybe than most folks. My dad was a very intelligent man in a lot of ways, but also he lived in the fringes in a lot of ways, actually almost always. So I grew up, um, he was a gold miner when I was a kid, which is not the most common thing unless you're back in the 49s, you know? But he had his own business. He fought for miners' rights. He was the head of the Northern California Mining Council, so fought for miners' rights in Sacramento. He also owned a logging company up in Washington when I was a kid. That said, he was doing a lot of that flying by the seat of his pants, not knowing what the hell he was really doing, but relying on his intelligence. So I guess I had that in my background and didn't really think about it until recently. But really, when I watched my uncle successful in the wine business, and so that was always kind of my periphery had him in it, and so noticing that, and then using him as an asset. Really, the thing that kicked me into gear was having my son. In 2008, I saw him coming down the pipeline, literally and figuratively, and I basically just said I need to get my shit together if I'm going to take care of a kiddo because I did live a little bit on the rougher side. I was like I want to. That was impetus for me to get my poop in a group, so I did, at least the best I could, and forced me to make moves that I normally wouldn't. Stress can be a great thing if you use it correctly, and that was a great stress for me.
Mm. So you really were thinking, man, I've got this child that depends on me, and I really need to get it together. It's not about me anymore. It's about someone else, and being a father and someone he can look up to, and a provider.
Yeah, without giving up large portions of who I am, which I have a hard time doing. But I was bringing somebody else into my life to share with, and I wanted to make sure that he was well provided for. So I'm doing my best still.
Yeah, well, that's great. Well, now let's move into the dig round, Jesse. And I'm going to ask you three quick questions and just give me some quick answers. What keeps you motivated daily?
What keeps me motivated? Well, ultimately, it's a passion for learning. Every day is a new chance to learn something new. So I would say it's just, and then also maybe seeing people that are unhappy around me because it shows me what I don't want to be. Um, I guess that's kind of it. I mean, learning, passion, and striving for happiness.
Sure. Now, who do you look up to as a business leader?
Let's see, business leader. I have inspirations in general. Um, Kind of one of my new philosophies is try and surround yourself with people that are better than you. But certain when it comes to gurus, I guess you'd say, like someone like Elon Musk. He's kind of a cliche figure these days, and he's got his pluses and minuses. But I think his unless he's pulling the wool over my eyes, I think he's got some good goals, changing the world for the better, and willing to take a loss and going out on some pretty serious limbs in order to do it. The world needs people like that, and I think he's a great pop example of that.
Yeah, I would agree for sure. And now you have to choose between street smarts versus book smarts. Which is more important?
Ooh, well, you're talking to a nerd from the streets, and so that's a tough one.
A
Um,
nerd from the streets. There you go.
that's right. So I don't know. I would actually I refuse to pick one. I say it's a hybrid, right down the middle of both.
A hybrid. Okay, we'll take that. Now, it sounds like since you've entered the world or the industry of wine and it's had its ups and downs for you and many pitfalls and kind of secret landmines and things, can you share with us one specific experience that was extremely mentally stressful for you? What happened and how did you get through it?
Well, the thing is, on my side of things, there's my brother and I are business owners and do the administrative side of things, but also we're making a natural product, which is um, has its trials and tribulations unto itself. So one of the most stressful things, I was taking over August Briggs my first harvest by my very lonesome, making at that point it was I think 16 or 17 different wines, which is a lot of wines for a guy who was still getting his feet wet in all reality. And 2011 happened, which is here was a really tough vintage, and so I got thrown into the fire and was trying to sort out my philosophy on winemaking, the logistics of the situation, all while probably having one of the roughest, if not the roughest, vintages in 30 years. So it was challenging my organizational skills, my interpretation skills, and basically problem solving in general. I had to make sure that I wasn't afraid to call people and ask questions. That's one of my new things also is you want to surround yourself with people who are willing to learn with you. When you start surrounding yourself with people who only know, then learning stops. And so I've tried to be open to always asking questions, and that was a great time to start asking questions because there was a lot of answers that I needed.
Well, was 2011, was that a drought in California? Was that one of the reasons?
It was quite the opposite. It was so typically we have a Mediterranean type climate here. So we're getting 70, 75, 80% of our rain in the winter months. And then we didn't really have a summer. We'll usually get, 85, 90, 95, 100 degrees here in Sonoma County in Napa. And that one, I think we maybe had 2 or 3 days above 85. And so we have a really hard time getting things ripe. It rained 2 inches in the middle of harvest. I usually pick cab kind of maybe mid-October, and I was picking cab a month later in mid-November. And so it was just there was mold pressure and mildew pressure. There was issues left and right. And so it was a matter of making this product for somebody that was palatable still, even though the conditions weren't conducive to do so. It was really stressful.
And did you at any point just go, God, what am I doing? Why am I here? I could be doing something else. Did you ever get to the point where you're just ready to just throw in the towel?
Well, no, yes. I mean, there's a lot of naps in your car during harvest because especially back then I was working, 65-hour weeks for about a 3-month period. And I was taking over a business and starting a tasting room. So I had bought the August Briggs company from my uncle at that point with 3 other partners, and then had Roma Lily with my brother, and everything was kind of teetering back and forth, and I didn't have enough time for anything, and I had a young son as well. So yeah, there was breaking points for sure, but at the same time, when other people are relying on me, that's when I really strive because letting myself down is one thing, but letting other people down really affects me. And so that was really my guiding light is knowing that other people relied on me to get the job done. So I had to persevere, I suppose.
So you really got to focus off of you and just focused on other people and like, okay, I need to do this for them. They depend on me to get this done and I'll figure it out. And then you had mentioned earlier in the conversation about relying on others around you for support and help. And it sounds like you utilize that as well.
Yeah, I'm inspired by people needing me. When I say I'm going to do something, I do my damnedest to do it. And so I always ask people, if someone says, "Oh, I need this," I say, "Well, when do you need it by?" Because if I know that there's a Jesse failed date, then it's more driving for me. If there's it's like in school, if your paper's due on Thursday, then I'm going to have it in by Thursday. But if you tell me it's due sometime in the semester, I'm going to probably wait till the day before the semester to do it, and it's not as conducive for getting things done.
Right. But you also have that kind of internal anxiety about, even though it's the last minute, you're going to get it done. You're going to pull it through. And I think if that's an important trait for entrepreneurs and anyone listening out there is you need that, your own kind of internal anxiety to help get things done. Because if you don't have that and you rely on other people to tell you to get things done, you're not going to be successful and you're never going to pull out, when you get into rough waters.
Yeah, that could be a blessing and a curse. Anxiety is great. There's a book that I started reading, haven't finished, called The Upside of Stress. And it was recommended to me by a guy at a coffee shop, and it has some great points. Stress can be a killer, but at the same time, stress can cause innovation and change, which is also a beautiful thing.
Right. Yeah. You can use it to build yourself up and to go forward, or you can kind of burn yourself down with it for sure.
Um,
Now, it sounds like you had your moments, going through this journey in the wine industry, but what would you say is one of those moments where you thought, wow, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing? Do you have one of those most fulfilling moments or one that you could share with the audience?
Let's see. Well, I mean, every time somebody tastes your wine and says this is the best wine I've ever tasted, which happens a lot, and then it's never lost on me because I know there's a lot of wines in the world and there's a lot of mouths in the world. So to have somebody, you see yourself as a kid, you don't ever see yourself making something that literally anybody in the world, if they wanted to, could buy a bottle of your wine and enjoy it. And so when somebody tastes your wine and loves the thing that you've made with your blood, sweat, and tears, um, then it's a great thing. It's really rejuvenating.
So that satisfaction of all that hard work, when you look at a glass of wine or you look at that bottle, you're able to reflect on, my goodness, all those different things that had to come together to make it. And then, it was a struggle with growing the grapes, with how all the different processes that you use. And so for someone to give you that kind of thank you, this is a wonderful, taste and whatnot, then it makes it all worthwhile. All the, like you said, that struggle and sweat and tears that went into it.
Yeah, making wine, it's a very, very romantic thing. It's people don't give enough credit to that glass of wine, especially the artisanal wines. The mass-produced wines, yes, it's still a beautiful little thing, but when you're spending that much time, that much energy into getting a fermented beverage into a bottle for people to enjoy and still be able to enjoy it 20 years later in some cases, that's a really cool thing that a lot of people take for granted.
Yeah. Now there's an old kind of, I don't know, idea out there that when people are making wine, that they take the grapes and they have people step on them with their feet. So do you hire people to pull off their socks and then stomp on grapes? Is that real? Or is that just
So yes and no. Depends on which kind of winery you have, and depends on which kind of winemaking philosophy you have. So Cabernet and Syrah, traditionally with August Briggs, we've always crushed. And so if you have a destemmer with a crusher wheel, so the grapes get destemmed and then fall through a crusher wheel, and it gently crushes the grapes open without smashing the seeds because that makes it bitter.
hmm
So we've always done that. But then we've moved to a winery that didn't have those, and so we had to get our happy little feet in there and stomp them, which actually can be a little bit more gentle because you're not crushing open the seeds and deteriorating the skins really badly, which can cause bitterness and over extraction of tannins and whatnot. So yeah, I mean, for August Briggs, one of the owners gets in there, and it's not fun. Everyone thinks like, oh, that's going to be fun. Well, try standing in 50-degree cold grapes for about 3 hours, and not that fun.
Now then people come out with like purple feet?
Uh, more more red because it's so damn cold.
Well, there you go. There's the real explanation. I didn't know if it was fact or fiction, and it appears to be fact for some people. That's awesome. Well,
Yep.
Jesse, we've come to the end of the show, and you've been a fantastic guest. I really appreciate your time. But before we go, tell the listeners where they can find your website and where are you on social media?
Let's see. Well, if you want to have some of the wines that we've made, you can check out romalily.com. That's ROMILLY.com. If you want to try the August Briggs wines, which kind of got me into the wine business, that's August, like the month, and then BRIGGS. Just type in August Briggs into Google and it'll pop up. I make wine for Jeff Gordon. Oh, there's a train. Make wine
Hey,
for
that's
Jeff
okay. That's
Gordon.
part of the show.
Yeah.
You get a free train.
Um, Jeff Gordon, he sells wines that I've made as well. Um, and then other than that, I just have my own social media page and that. But if you want to have a look there, it's not as interesting, but I'm around.
Sure. Now, you said Jeff Gordon. Jeff Gordon, the NASCAR driver?
Correct. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's awesome. That's good to know. And do you have a wine tasting room when people are up in that area in Napa Valley? They can come visit you?
Yeah, for August Briggs is probably the best place to try the wines these days. And that's up in Calistoga, which is northern Napa. And we have a tasting room right downtown. And it's really, a lot of Napa has become very aristocratical and slightly pretentious, and you have to make your $70 tasting appointment 2 months out or whatever. And we're much more approachable. And so just swing on by. We'd love to have you. It's a little bit different than most Napa tastings these days.
Awesome. Incredible. Well, thank you, Jesse. I really appreciate your time. You've been a fantastic guest, and I look forward to staying in touch.
Likewise. Please do.
Take care.
Cheers.
Want more entrepreneurial tips? Go to timlaskas.com.